one of the reasons I do those ice buckets, ice baths, as most people call them, is because there's quite a process that happens. I mentioned earlier that your mind is this defense mechanism. So you throw yourself in there and it goes into overdrive. So this pain, panic, and fear that come together in a split second, they accentuate self-doubt, and that you deny the ability of rational thought, and the hyperventilation. Right. All of that happens. And while that is happening in your head, your body starts implementing its own defense mechanisms, and that is the blood rushes from your extremities to your center core. And that's not just fingers and toes, that's arms and biceps and thighs and everything. All the blood rushes out of those muscles to sit here in your center core, because, I mean, I'm no doctor or medical dude, but you can live without arms and legs, but you can't live without a heart pumping blood to the brain. Mm-hmm. So all the blood rushes in here to keep your heart warm enough to keep supplying your brain with blood. So you lose all coordination and strength in your muscles because there's no blood supplying oxygen to those muscles. And that is a process I need to understand and I need to figure out. So, for example, when I took on a challenge in Antarctica to try and be the first in the world to do an official mile south of the Antarctic Circle, I would sit in there and I would have to compute that I'm going to be feeling all of this. Because as you sit in that ice tub, it's brutal. It's absolutely brutal, and it hurts. It's excruciating pain. And through that pain, I've got to actually calm myself and say, well, you're going to be walking down the gangway of an ocean liner in Antarctica in 10 days, Ryan. You're going to be diving into water that's as cold as what you're sitting in, and you're going to try and swim a mile distance. How on earth are you going to overcome the massive instincts that are going to kick in, the hyperventilation, that pain, panic, and fear, that petrifiedness? You're going to be scared. Everything is going to just try and get you out. How are you going to not sprint the first 200 meters out of sheer adrenaline and panic, and then not be, not have enough energy to do the 1,400 meters thereafter? All of these things I've got to try and visualize while I'm sitting in that horrible tub of ice. So that's why it's a very important part of the process for me. But I don't do it every day, and life wouldn't be worth living if I did. It's terrible.
Yeah. Have you noticed any sort of differences in like your health or anything like that? Like since you started doing this and spending more time in cold water, does it benefit you in everyday life at all?
So there's a massive global movement. I'm sure you're aware of that. The cold has got.
Oh yeah, everyone on my Instagram feed is showing off how they get into ice tubs.
Yeah, you know what? I look at those and I think I wish I'd love them to come and do an ice tub with me, because so many people. So we're going left of centre, but so many fill it up with water and throw some ice to cover the top layer. And they jump in, and it's probably brought down a few degrees, but it's you have to do an ice tub properly, because of course when you get in as a human, immediately you start warming that water up. So you got to keep adding ice, because if you're in the ocean, you're not going to warm the ocean up. It's going to keep cooling you down. So So you asked about the health benefits. There's definitely health benefits to the cold. I don't know that. I'm sure everyone's heard of the Wim Hof method and all these things which are taking on big time. I'm certainly not criticizing them, but I just don't know a lot about it. What I do, I don't think there's any health benefit to. I've been pushing boundaries, so to the nth degree.
Certainly a mental health benefit.
Yeah, so let me tell you about the process and why I think everybody comes back and thinks there's such a great health benefit. And I'm not saying there isn't, so don't get me wrong. But when the most dangerous part of any extreme cold swim is not while you're swimming, okay? It's actually when you get out. And that is because there's a process called the after drop. Okay, so now you've done your swim. You've gone through the pain in the beginning. You've got through that pain. You feel good about yourself. You've now sat in the water for a little bit, or you've had your swim. You then get out and you feel great for a little bit. And then all of a sudden, that warm blood that's now sitting in your center core, protecting your heart, starts to release, and it goes back to your extremities. Okay, so it goes back to your fingers and toes and whatever. And now they're frigid because they've had no blood in them and they've been exposed to the cold. Mm-hmm. So that warm blood that was in your core rapidly cools down, and it circulates back to your center core and cools your core temperature down. It's called the after drop, so after swim drop. And that core temperature just keeps coming down. Now, it's not that dangerous to most people doing sort of mildly cold swims and enjoying it a little bit. But what we do, it's a deadly process, because if you drop one notch below, you can't control it. If you drop one notch below, you're dead, finished. That's just how it is. Hypothermia is an absolute killer. But
that's what hypothermia is.
Yeah, that's hypothermia. And when you do when at some point presuming you don't die, which clearly we do a lot to make sure we don't. You then turn what we call turning the corner. So you go back into and you start shivering. Okay, and shivering is good because it means you're on the up. And when you turn that corner and you slowly start getting some warmth back in your blood and your bones, it releases endorphins like you won't believe. And I mean, I've never done drugs, so I don't know, but I presume it's like being on a high. It must be what it's like. Someone, when I gave a keynote yesterday, someone said, "Trust me, drugs are a lot easier." So to feel the high. So,
there's a lot easier ways to get the high.
I wouldn't know, so I'll stick to the cold. But I think when you feel that and you realize just how euphoric that feeling is, because when I do the cold swims, I always come out saying, "Well, that's it, finished. I'm more intelligent than this. I'm not doing that again. That was horrific." And then suddenly I come out of that after drop and I'm turn the corner and I'm like, wow, what's next? That was awesome, how rad. And it's just a endorphin release that just makes you feel so great about life. And that's why it's treating depression and it's treating anxiety and all of these things. You just feel so good about yourself.
Yeah, there is no better feeling. I'm aware of the feeling just from surfing in like really cold water for hours on end and then getting out and warming up and feeling that kind of like zero drag type feeling. Yeah. It's like there's nothing holding you back. You're just kind of like moving against, like without gravity almost.
So you've got a good taste of what it's about.
Yeah. And then, but when I do it in the tub or like in my pool, I have to get out once like I start to feel the pins and needles in my head and in my face. Yeah. It's different. When you're out in the ocean, like for me, for surfing, it's like, it's different because I'm not thinking about the elements because I'm having so much fun, like doing something else. My mind is occupied. I'm distracted. Exactly. Yeah. But when you're in the pool, it's like, well, you could hit the escape button just by moving 2 feet to the right or just climbing right out. It's like right there. Yeah. So it's way more difficult and it feels more painful too.
Yeah. But you've hit the nail on the head. The distraction thing, I talk quite a lot about that because, if you're not distracted and you walk into really cold water, it's excruciating, and that's all you think of. And I learned this. There's a beach called Camps Bay down in Cape Town, and it's often really flat, and you just walk in. But every now and then, there's a set of waves that are coming through that dump, and they can really hurt you if you get your timing wrong. And every time I go swim there and there are no waves, I find it excruciatingly hard to get in that water. You go through all the pain. But every time there are waves, suddenly I'm swimming, and have forgotten all about the cold and the pain and hardly notice it. And I started to put all those things together, and the pain's still there, but you just focused on something else. You focused on not getting dumped by the waves. So what happened to that pain? Or what happened to all those negative emotions and sentiments and squealing and everything else that you do? So that's always been fascinating to me, and I've looked quite deeply into that.